Welcome back to the Center Square Daily. I'm your host, Greg Bishop, and now let's put Illinois in focus, where we've got an election in less than a week and a lot of choices to be made, not just who's going to be the Republican gubernatorial candidate, but also who's going to be the candidate for the Republicans and the Democrats for U.S. Senate after U.S. Senator Dick Durbin from Springfield announced that he was not going to run for another term. That opened up that seat, and we've got a handful of candidates for Republicans and like 10 candidates for Democrats. One of those Republican candidates joining us now for the Center Square Daily, Don Tracy. Thank you for taking time with us. How are things looking out there these final days?
Glad to be on your show. Thank you for this opportunity. Good to see you again since we last saw you at the debate up in Chicago at Benedict University, 5:60 a.m. I think the race is looking really good for the primary. I have 5 opponents, but everybody tells me I'm the front runner, and everywhere I go, people say, "You've got this." Actually, it makes me very nervous to hear that because we're running through the tape. We're taking nothing for granted, but all signs are that we're doing very, very, very well in every corner of the state. One sign is that I have over 150 Republican leaders, institutions, and grassroots organizations have endorsed me. For example, every single Republican legislator that has endorsed in Illinois in this race has endorsed me. The Young Republicans of Illinois, statewide, have endorsed me. The Young Republicans of McLean County, the Illinois Family Institute, the Polish American Police Association just endorsed me recently. Almost all the Chicago suburb townships that have endorsed me. Almost every Republican elected official in my home county here in Springfield, Sangamon County, have endorsed me. I don't think any of the other 5 have a single home county endorsement. Most of them are from Cook County, as are the leading Democrats on the other side. And I have the only Cook County countywide elected Republican official as an endorsement. So based on the endorsements, I think we're doing pretty well. But of course, the only endorsement I really care about, that I'm really focused on, is the endorsement of the voters next Tuesday.
Now, obviously, at the Center Square, we focus on how government impacts taxpayers. What are you hearing from taxpayers when it comes to things like the national debt, things like social service programs, things like immigration enforcement?
I hear more about property taxes in Illinois than I hear about anything else because we are a leading state when it comes to property taxation. And I saw Wallet Hub just gave us a trophy for being the overall leading tax state. And then on, but the number one issue I hear about, Greg, is of course cost of living. And then immigration, and then the Iran war. Those are the 3 big things. And crime. Crime is in Illinois. that's a subject, particularly when I'm up in Chicago, and I spend a fair amount of time in Chicago. In fact, I was riding the Red Line. I rode the Red Line, I don't know, a couple months ago, shortly before that career criminal had been arrested 72 times, tried to burn alive Bethany McGee on the Blue Line, and then I was sleeping there in I have a Chicago condo that I bought fairly recently because I knew I'd be spending a lot of time up there. Just a few blocks north of that flash mob. After when they had their tree lighting, only in Chicago, they have a tree lighting ceremony, and there's a 300-person flash mob that ends up with eight people being shot in near the Chicago River. Not far from the Trump Tower and just a few blocks from where I was staying. So crime, when you're in Chicago, crime is the issue more than anything else.
Well, Don, as somebody who's running for U.S. Senate, how would you being in the U.S. Senate impact the local decisions of property tax rates for a school district in central Illinois, for instance?
Well, one of the ways is through by promoting a school choice and the school choice provision in the Big Beautiful Act. And, the governor of Illinois has a choice to make. He can either opt in, as many governors have already done, and pull in money from the federal government that will not take a single dollar away from Illinois public schools and will provide an opportunity for particularly poor kids to be able to escape bad public schools. I mean, we have some great public schools here in Illinois, but some of them are very substandard, some of the worst in the nation, particularly up in the Chicago area. And through this program, we can get some help there for those poor kids that want to have the choice that teacher union leaders like Stacey Davis Gates, they have, because of her high salary. I think she makes in the hundreds of thousands. She can send her kids to private schools, but most of the kids in the CPS, which she more or less seems to run, they don't have that choice. And this would help give them that choice. And if the governor doesn't opt in to this federal program, then Illinois taxpayers will still be able to get this federal tax credit, but that money will not go to Illinois schools. It will go to out-of-state schools.
Don, on the issue of crime, on the issue of immigration, obviously Illinois has, sanctuary policies for non-citizens. We've got no cash bail. The Trump administration has proposed and has ordered that federal dollars be held from states that have these types of policies. Do you support that in trying to change local policy by restricting federal tax dollars?
Well, one of the problems, with relying on federal dollars to run state projects, state responsibilities, is usually federal dollars come with strings attached. And when the Democrats are in charge of Washington, those attached strings are like DEI or, some kind of, liberal thing. But when Republicans are in charge of Washington, the strings attached are more likely to be, responsibility strings, such as if we're going to provide federal dollars to help with mass transit in Chicago, and Chicago needs help with mass transit. And mass transit is really important to the Chicagoland area. Then it should have, we should have strings attached. Like, if we're going to give you federal money, then you need to have real security on the trains. We can't have career criminals terrorizing train riders, and then which reduces in declining ridership, which reduces results in fewer fares, and the need for more subsidies, either with state dollars or with federal dollars. So, I mean, it's just, these are the kind of common sense solutions that I plan to champion in Washington, D.C. that seems to be sorely lacking, certainly in Illinois government.
Don, some of the other major issues, obviously, that are going to be debated throughout Senate races across the country, including here in Illinois, obviously the Iran war, and whether or not that is a war that Congress should be declaring. Your thoughts on the ability for the president to conduct these types of military operations and how much involvement Congress should have?
Well, the thing to remember about the Iranian conflict is that we've basically been in conflict with Iran for 47 years, ever since they overthrew the Shah of Iran. One of the first things they did was they disregarded longstanding, centuries-old diplomatic immunity by taking hostages from our U.S. embassy in Iran and holding those hostages. I think there are 52 of them for over a year, for 444 days. And that started the conflict. And the other thing to remember is that Iran is the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism. In fact, the U.S. Congress just confirmed that in the U.S. House with a resolution that was supported by was a bipartisan vote, supported by 150 Democrats in addition to, I think, all the Republicans. But it's notable that two of the leading candidates for this nomination to replace Dick Durbin in the U.S. Senate, both of those Democrats voted against that resolution. And the other thing to remember about Iran is that their foreign policy for 47 years has been death to America. And they have backed that up with the bombing of Khobar Towers, the bombing of the USS Cole, bombing in Beirut, all the roadside mines in Iraq that killed so many American soldiers and maimed many thousands more. So this has been a conflict that we have been kind of fighting with one hand behind our back, and at some point you have to make a choice. And the Democrat talking point today, if you've been watching the news, is it's a war of choice. Trump's waging a war of choice. Well, the real choice here in dealing with a terrorist state like Iran is appeasement or conflict. And Obama and Biden both tried appeasement by negotiating with Iran. And look what that got us. That got us proxy wars with the Houthis, Hamas, and Hezbollah. And the Hamas war. It got us, some would argue it got us the invasion of Crimea and Ukraine by Russia. I mean, appeasement just does not, you try to negotiate first. Trump tried that here. It didn't work. So the choice here was not between conflict and no conflict. It was between appeasing a country that both sides of the aisle have for decades agreed on a bipartisan basis that a terrorist state like Iran cannot be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. And they're on the verge of doing that. And fortunately, we had a president with the courage to stop them. Now, nobody knows how this is going to turn out. Now that we're in it, we've got to win it. But that was the choice. It wasn't a choice between no conflict and conflict. It was between appeasement, which hasn't worked, and conflict. And if you want to look at history on this, we had the same choice in 1938 at Munich. And the Allies, were negotiated with Hitler over Czechoslovakia. Hitler wanted to take over the Sudetenland, which would allow him then to take over all of Czechoslovakia. Czechoslovakia had a 1 million-man army. If the Allies had tried to stop Hitler, then they could have with Czechoslovakia's 1 million-man army. But they were exhausted by World War I, so they chose appeasement, hoping that would stop Hitler. Well, it didn't stop. Churchill said to Chamberlain, after he came back from Munich with his appeasement deal, Chamberlain called it peace in our time. When Churchill said to Chamberlain, at Munich, you're given a choice between war and dishonor. You chose dishonor and you shall have war. And that war turned out to be World War II, which took 60 to 90 million lives. So that's the choice here. These are hard, tough decisions. We don't know how this is going to turn out. But now that we're in it, we have to win it.
Don Tracy running for the Republican nomination for U.S. Senate out of Illinois, and another big issue that the Senate is likely going to be either addressing soon, or it's going to be an issue when you get in there, if you get in there, and that is the filibuster. Clearly, President Trump has made it an issue to say, blast through that, get something passed on voter ID. How do you feel about the filibuster? Is it necessary, or is it being abused?
First, let me say every state should have voter photo ID. There is no justification for not having voters identify themselves before they vote for the leader of the free world, for the president of the most powerful country in the history of the world. The Democrats will say, well, we can't have voter ID because there's some hermit living in the mountains of North Carolina that doesn't have a government-issued photo ID. Well, almost all voter ID bills I've heard of, they will provide you with a free government-issued ID. Then what they'll say is that, well, voter ID, it makes it harder for people to, vote. They have to bring their driver's license with them to vote or something like that. And so it will suppress voting. Well, voter ID will suppress voting. It will suppress illegal voting. So there's just no justification for not having voter ID. It's an 80-20 issue. Even a majority of Democrats support it. The only people who don't support it are Democrat activists and political leaders. And also then the other part of the bill, the SAVE Act, is registration. You have to prove citizenship for registration. Well, I thought the rule was the Democrats admit the law is only citizens vote. Okay, then why shouldn't you have to prove citizen when you register? And then they'll try to conflate it by saying, well, not everybody has their birth certificate when they're going to vote. You don't, under the SAVE Act, you don't need to prove citizenship every time you vote. Only when you register or re-register. That sort of thing. So the SAVE Act is very important because it would require every state, not just, I think there's 26 states that have some form of that, but a lot of the blue states, of course, they don't. The Democrat-controlled states don't. So it's a really important act. I'm a strong supporter of the filibuster. I mean, without the filibuster, you would have a yo-yo government. Every time we have an administration change in Washington, and recently it's been every 4 years, you just from one side, completely radical far left administration to, a good, what we consider good conservative, responsible, smart administration. But the Senate with its filibuster requires a certain amount of bipartisanship. Some of the worst bills we've ever had, like Obamacare, they're one-sided. They had 60 votes just for a short period of time, and they rammed it down our throats. And it's a bad bill, and it's a bad bill because it wasn't bipartisan. If you're going to do big stuff like that, you need bipartisanship. So I support the filibuster. Now, one kind of compromise to get the SAVE Act passed without blowing up the filibuster. And remember, Harry Reid blew it up. And look what it cost the Democrats. It gave us, a Supreme Court of 6 Republicans to 3. And McConnell told Reid when he blew up the filibuster for voting for the Supreme Court, someday you will regret this. Maybe sooner than later, or sooner than you realize. And he was right. So there are consequences to blowing up the filibuster. It could really blow up in our face if we blow it up. So, just think what the Democrats would do without the filibuster. They would make Puerto Rico a state with 2 Democrat senators. They would make Washington, D.C. a state with 2 Democrat senators. They would pack the Supreme Court. So, I support the filibuster. Now, there's talk about the talking filibuster. And that's something new. There are pros and cons to that. For something big like this, I think maybe we should try the talking filibuster, but there are downsides to it because it would allow Democrats to present all kinds of amendments. It would tie up the Senate. We wouldn't be able to get other things done. So it's not a risk-free alternative.
Don Tracy, Republican running for the nomination. Of course, the March 17th primary is right around the corner. Greatly appreciate you taking time here for the Center Square Daily and Illinois in Focus.